This is Gary Atencio with CNTV, and today we're in Virginia. I am here with the Tree of Life author. Since 2022, this practitioner of modern Druid traditions has written fictional novels and short stories while hosting a weekly podcast online. I am joined here with Terrance. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
I'm glad to be here.
Let's start off a little bit about yourself. Growing up in a military family, you left home to see the world. And like your father, you also joined the military. You were deployed overseas and were able to see many parts of the world. Growing up, your mother encouraged you to read. Share with us how reading and learning is still a big part of who you are today.
Well, and it kind of goes back to my granddad. He taught us that never spend a day if you don't learn something. So I took that to heart. And then, when I got older, I also ran into another person. I was in my early 20s, just getting a start in life. And he also told me the same thing. He says, if you go a day without, thinking that you know everything, throw the keys in the bowl and stay home. I took that to heart ever since. So I try to learn things every day. I'm a voracious reader even now, and I'm just a year shy of 70. So I don't stop. And with everything that's going on right now, with the chaos everywhere, I'm learning more and more every day.
That is great.
That's part of the podcast and the thing with the book as well. I wrote the book a couple of years ago.
Yep.
But I had a friend encourage me because I was, I've always been what they call it, a never Trumper, I guess. And so when I found out that he was running for election again, I started writing short chapters. It wasn't intended to be a book at the time, but it turned into one with some encouragement from a couple of people. And it's been, and now I've decided to make it an ongoing process. So, wow. I'm working on the second one as we speak.
So this is, it's been an ongoing process for you, reading, and now you're writing. In ancient Celtic cultures, a druid was a member of a high-ranking priestly class. Acting as a religious leader, maybe a teacher or advisor. Is this kind of how you see yourself today in today's modern world, would you say?
Not necessarily, because ancient Celtic society was divided up into a class system. So the Druids, as you mentioned, were more the religious sect, and they traditionally managed all the ceremonies and the holidays and all the other kinds of things. Now, the teachers and the judicial branch, if you will, the caste system, they were called the Brehons, Brehons. And those were the teachers and the lawgivers and all that in ancient society. Now, for myself, though, because of my career, a career soldier, I consider myself more of the warrior class. But regardless of that, I still hold to the old traditions. So in my case, since I gave up any thoughts of Christianity decades ago, I've been following the ancient holidays and traditions of my ancestors for years and years and years now.
Interesting.
That's part of why I don't necessarily consider myself a druid, because now you're telling people, well, you're a priest. Well, no, I'm not a priest. I'm the guy that was riding, if you go to ancient mythology, I'm one of those guys, 4,000 years ago, that have been riding around with a guy in a chariot with a couple of horses throwing spears at my enemies.
That's fantastic. Do us a favor and pronounce for us your website, which basically means Tree of Life, and explain what that means.
Well, Crownabihas is how it's pronounced in English. And it's basically the Tree of Life. It's like on my website, and I kind of described it a little bit on the homepage, where when they set up back in the ancient days, when they would set up a new village, the Druid priest would map out an area around the largest oak tree that they could find, and they would keep it as part of their center of life in the city. or even the towns, the villages. And so whenever they would have gatherings, whether it's talking about, going to war with somebody, or just, one of the bards or the fillets would come in and either tell stories or sing songs, they would do it underneath the village oak tree. And basically the village oak tree was considered just the life of the village. And, everything revolved around it back in those days.
That is
so
interesting.
I consider this, my website, kind of the same premise. I want to tell stories. I want to bring the news from the outside world and kind of make the tree, the tree, the center of everything.
Yep. I mean, so in these Celtic traditions, an oak tree would be dedicated to gather around. So this tree of life, it was very central to the community, really a meeting place. Your village oak tree is a news editorial referencing news really from around the world. Is information delivered both in writing as well as your podcast?
Yes. So there's two different web pages in my website. One of them is the blog section, where the written form of everything that I talk about on my podcast is put in. There's also a separate page that I've set up so that if you actually wanted to watch the video on my Substack page or just listen to an audio podcast version, it's available on that. And it's called the Village Oak Tree Podcast page. And it's, it's up, in the tab page of the website. So I give everybody the option to find out what I'm about, whether you want to listen to it or read it, because I've had some people reach out to me and say, hey, I'd rather read it. I don't want to watch you. And I'm like, okay. So I publish it with links to the news articles, and people can read it as they wish.
So let me break this down, those options, if you will, for the public. First of all, in 2022, you began writing blogs. What inspired you to begin putting thoughts to paper, really as a retiree?
Well, as somebody who's deployed overseas, and I made 8 tours overseas. 3 of them were combat tours. So my head was a little rattled when I came back and got off active duty. So I've had various, times where I've wanted to talk to people through the Veterans Administration. And one of my counselors there encouraged me to put my thoughts into writing as a form of therapy. So, about 3 years ago, I started doing that. And it really wasn't, I wasn't a very good writer at all. I had no clue, but I just started putting my thoughts down, and I found an online publication that started me out, and a couple of people encouraged me. They taught me a few things. So the writing itself has gotten better over time. But again, it started out as just something simple to put my thoughts down, and more like a journal of sorts. And then it kind of morphed out from there. So now, I'm a full-blown activist now.
That's great. Your blogs, they cover politics to a wide array of world events. Not only your words, but you're sharing authors on Medium. Do you enjoy sharing the works of others as well?
I do. I follow a lot of people, and there are certain people who I like what they read. Now, I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. This young lady in Bulgaria, she writes beautiful poetry. And so I subscribe to get her stuff in my inbox whenever she writes something. And, I've given her lots of encouragement to do, because obviously English is not her first language. And so she's mentioned that she's had some struggles over that, but she writes beautiful poetry. But on the other spectrum, there's a young man, he's not so young, he's almost my age, but he lives in England, and he's a noted UK activist over there. So I get what's going on that side of the woods with his activism, and we banter back and forth with that. But it goes, for me, it's all about what resonates with me at any given time. I also subscribe to newsletters from Ireland through the Sinn Féin, and I pay a lot of attention to what's going on in Irish politics. I subscribe to a lot of YouTube channels from overseas and here in the United States, just to get a perspective on everything that's going on around the world. Some of the material I use in my podcast, some of it not so much. But, I like to have a wide, broad variety of information, and I use it as I wish, to let people know what's going on.
Speaking of what resonates with you, I mean, sites that share news across the web, I mean, they can be biased or unbiased. What will your readers find, and whom do you hope to attract?
Well, the stories that I pick out are usually the ones I think are not really mainstream. Okay, so I follow certain channels. Every once in a while, like for example, Al Jazeera. I've been a fan of Al Jazeera since I was in Afghanistan in 2002. That's a whole nother story you could go a half an hour about. But the point is, I've been following their articles. But like anything else, like you just said, they're a bit biased here, especially the last couple of years. So I've been kind of backing off of them a little bit here the last year or so. But on the other hand, I've been picking up a lot of articles from another Middle East journal called The Cradle. And they write some very, very good articles, and I pick some of their stuff. But then I also look at the DW, European magazine, online magazine out of Germany. They write a lot of stuff about European politics that I pay attention to. So again, I pick and choose from stuff all over the world. I've subscribed to RT out of Russia to get what's going on over there, and some domestic
That's great.
outfits here in the United States. But again, you have to be really careful about what you read, and all of depending on who writes what. Some of them could be biased, some of them not so much. You have to learn to read between the lines.
Interesting. I mean, beyond blogs, you now also write fictional novels and short stories. Why are stories created by your imagination something that has interested you?
Well, I think that goes back to when I was a kid. Now, you understand, I grew up in a very, very poor family, and, television was, limited, very limited growing up. So my mother encouraged me to read. Now, I got a younger brother, and he's not much of a reader, but I was. And as soon as I started picking up books, she noticed. And so she encouraged that as hugely for me to something to do when the weather was bad outside, which living way up in the northeast part of the United States, during the winters, they're very long, very cold, and you don't get outside that much. So again, reading was a way for me to spend my time. And I took to it like a fish out of water. And I've been that way ever since. So the reading part reading has always been a part of my life. Now I've taken that to the next step where I write things. At first I started out about 3 years ago writing fictional short stories, Irish mythology, about Irish mythology and things like that. Stories weren't that bad, but the platform I was writing for at the time, the readers there weren't real big on that. They were more interested in health and welfare articles and feel good stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm not into that. No, so I let it go. But the stories are still there.
What journey will the reader find in the first book of your series, Fugitive in a New United States?
Well, the journey basically is about what the United States might look like if things keep going the way they are. We're already seeing some of that as we speak. We have detention centers in the United States, which in my book, I take the fictional version of it and make them camps, basically very similar to the detention camps we put the Japanese in 1941. The protagonist is an immigrant. Basically, his parents immigrated to the United States. Bad things happened when the government, changed over in my book. And now he's got a bounty on his head and he's on the run. But he's a doctor. First and foremost, he's a doctor. So he's, using his talents to help people while he's trying to escape from the authoritarians. And that's the start of the story. And I developed the first book of the series based on his past a little bit, but mostly his current adventure. I put a little romance in it because he meets somebody along the way, and so on and so forth. And like I said, I'm right now I'm writing the second book. It's called The Camps, where I'll give you kind of a little bit of a spoiler. You know, the doctor that I write about in the first book, and I do allude to this a lot throughout the story. But in the second book, he's gonna run down to the southeast and rescue his sisters who've been in one of these camps since his parents got killed. So
Wow.
that's the only spoiler I'll give you.
Yep. And you definitely don't want to give away too much on that. Folks are probably still reading that first book, waiting for the second one. I mean, this story is set against a backdrop of societal collapse. It is fiction, yet does the story mirror reality today, in your opinion?
We're getting close. We're getting very close. The big thing I'm looking at right now is that if you read a lot of the news, and it depends who you listen to, there's a lot of journalists out there right now who are saying that the American government is running along this Project 2025 game plan, which and I did read it, this Project 2025 game plan, if they follow it to its eventual fruition, we will be living under an authoritarian theocracy. That is the eventual game plan. Now, if that happens, you can just about imagine that these detention centers that we're hearing about in Louisiana and Texas, they're going to get expanded to other places around the country. It's just a given. So the question is, are we going to have that or not? And like I said, it's fiction for now.
Yep, I can see. So lastly, I mean, you share insights and information through a podcast. What will the listener who tunes in find on your podcast?
Well, I try to give unbiased commentary on the news stories that I pick out. I try to tell it from an ordinary man's journey. I try to tell it from somebody who's like myself. I'm a pensioner, At my age, I'm collecting Social Security, and I'm mandatorily doing Medicare. I have my Army pension and all that. So I'm considered, what the UK, they call a pensioner. And so my commentary comes from somebody who's, could lose that at any given day in that kind of environment. I also use a lot of my upbringing. Like I said, I grew up very poor. So a lot of that has shaped my outlook on life. So again, my commentary is coming from the ordinary person, just like you are. You're the one struggling from paycheck to paycheck, and yeah, so am I, so to speak. And that's how I tailor my podcasts.
Interesting. I mean, your blogs, your podcast, your book, and they can all be found right there on your website. How can the public support your online community?
Well, there's a couple of ways. On my website, I have a donations tab. If you feel like that you want to donate to my causes. Also, I use a company called RSS.com for my audio podcast. And the webpage for that is, again, the Village Oak Tree. And there's a donations tab as well on that webpage for anybody who wants to go there and listen to the podcast. Again, they're audio only for those, which is fine. But again, there's a couple of ways to do that. I have a direct link on my website to rss.com where you can listen right there. All the latest episodes are right front and center. You don't have to go searching for them. Same thing with if you would rather watch a video. I have a Substack page, and the videos are uploaded there. And you can do the same thing there. I mean, I've also got a YouTube channel as well. If you just want to watch the video, the Village Oak Tree. So everything's under the same name. You can pretty much search it for it anywhere.
Many ways that the viewers out there can connect with you. I think that's great. Viewers, let's take a look at the bottom of the screen right there. And what you're going to see is his website. See his writings, and stay tuned for the second book in the series, which will be coming soon. His site is where you too can sit around the Village Oak Tree to discuss important topics and learn more about the world around us. Crown Nabiha. This is Gary Atencio with CNTV, and if you don't know, now you know.